This is the Digital DJ Tips review of the Rane One. We're going to look at the decks, we're going to look at the mixer, the pads, the pro features, the competition for this unit, and I'm going to give you our thoughts. By the end of it, you're going to be sure whether this is the right unit for you. Now, we've also got a scratch demo, and there's also a written review of this, which I'll tell you about later. As always, if you enjoy this, please do share, like, follow, and subscribe. So, it's a 2-channel motorized DJ controller from Rane aimed at scratch DJs who want the feel of vinyl but in a DJ controller. It's got pretty much everything you find on, say, the Rane 70 mixer and the Rane 12 motorized DJ controller, but all shoved into this unit, which is no bigger than something like the Pioneer DDJ 1000. In fact, it's a tiny bit smaller than this, which is a kind of similar style. That's upside down, isn't it? A kind of similar style controller for Serato. It's therefore quite unique, and certainly unique for Rane, who have never made a controller before. It's lacking a few things of these two things. So there's no hardware effects on it apart from filters. There's no USB hub like you get on this mixer. And of course the vinyl is 7-inch, not 12-inch, but it feels 100% Rane. And so it's quite a compelling thing to put out into the market. So let's start by talking about these decks. So to start with, they're brilliant. They're really accurate. Our scratch tutor Steve tells me that even if you're spinning back 4 or 5 rotations to find a cue point, it's bang on. They're just at 100% total success. They are fully motorized. You know, you can play the motor backwards. Music goes backwards, motor goes backwards. They just act and behave like mini Technics turntables. High torque motor. There's a switch around the back to alter the torque to something that you might be happiest with. They're very similar to the decks on the NS7, if anyone remembers the Newmark NS7, in that they've got this control vinyl on the top with a little spring-loaded button to hold it into place on the spindle. There's a slip mat and a die-cast aluminium platter. To reassemble it, you push it all together like that. You put this on the platter like this, twist it around until you hear it click. There you go, that click there, and that's in place. Really simple. You have to do that when they arrive. They arrive all kind of like taken apart. And it, to all intents and purposes, feels like using a Technics turntable. Apart from, of course, there's no needle to decide where you want to be on the track. And that's handled by this touch strip here that just shows you, as you can see on the screen, where you are in the track. It's recessed a little bit, which means that you don't touch it by accident. It's got a bit of noise. You can actually hear when the music's down and when that fan on that laptop's not playing away, you can hear the motors going away in the background there. They are real motors, just like real turntables. The stop time, you know, when you want to stop a track playing, it slows down at the speed at which this stop is set to, and it's reflected in the speed that's slowing down on there. You know, you set it to a long time and it takes a long time to slow down. They're really, really cool. We really love them. So let's move on to the mixer. So the mixer section is, again, it's just Honey, I Shrunk the Mixer, because on this mixer here, if you take away the pads and stuff, you could make this mixer a lot smaller, and that's really what they've done here, because of course the pads, which we'll talk about in a minute, have been pushed underneath the decks. So the mixer has got on it the levels, 3-band EQ, which is a kill EQ, by the way. Totally kills the track. And booth and master outputs with meters. So the meters actually are behaving a bit strangely on this one. I think it's because it's a pre-release model. So normally the outside meters should be your gain controls or your level controls, and the inside ones are your main output, but my main output, I can turn it all the way down and they're still lit. What it's actually doing is taking the main output from Serato's alternative master output, which it shouldn't do. I'm sure that'll get fixed up at some point. I want to talk about the scratch functions though, because of course that's what this mix is all about. So again, you know, below this area here, as in with most scratch mixers, it's pretty empty to facilitate crossfader action. Really lovely crossfader. You can adjust the torque of the crossfader or the tension of the crossfader inside by taking these screws off, and you can adjust that in there. It's not an external adjuster for that, but that is there for you. And it being a scratch mixer, as I say, nice and buttery here, a little bit more resistance on the up faders. You have the controls for how sharp the faders are around the front, along with the reverse switches for those as well. So pretty much everything you'd expect to find in that section of a scratch mixer. Now the effects are a nice compromise between the power of Serato's built-in effects and the immediacy needed for scratching. So what they've done is they've got the 6 effects buttons here control the 6 effects in Serato that you can have on the 2 Serato effects engines. And whatever you set here works on both decks. So you don't get a chance to put one effect on one deck and one on another or anything like that. You can select more than one at once by holding down the button and pressing another one like that. And you could select all 6 if you wanted, but whatever you select works across both decks. So I've selected the phaser there now, and that phaser is on. I've got the depth control here and the time control for how quickly that phaser is kicking in. You've got a tap button for putting your own speed in there as well, if for effect or because it hasn't guessed the speed of your track correctly. It's a nice compromise between the power there, but the immediacy you need here, that you get to choose one effect or one combo of effects, but the depth, the beat, and the effect that's on both channels is fixed from there. You do, of course, have the filters independently as well, so each channel you can be playing with filter and your chosen effect. If you haven't seen paddles before, they're very simple. Hold it down, it's on until you take your hand off it, push it up, and it locks on. So I want to talk about the pads, because the pads are really nice. They are the same size as the pads on, say, the Rane 70. They're a little bit smaller than, say, on the DJM S11. I believe the S11 pads from Pioneer are a bit bigger than this, but they're the same size, as I say, as they are on Rane mixers. Very nice, rubberized, full RGB, and they are controlling the full force of what Serato can give you on pads, basically. All the Serato pad stuff is here. So I'm not going to go through every single function because they're the same on all Serato gear, but I will talk to you a little bit about them. So we've got the hot cues, save loop, roll, sampler, and slicer. And each of these, if you press it a second time, will give you something related to that isn't quite that, or most of them will. So for instance, we're now in hot cue mode. That's the hot cue at the beginning of my track. There's another hot cue there. I can set a hot cue by pressing one, delete it by holding shift and pressing it. It's very standard. If I press it again, I'm in the pitch play mode. And pitch play lets me play from the currently selected cue, but I can alter the pitch of it like this. And you need the pitch and time expansion pack to do that, which is an extra that you need to buy to work on top of the Serato that it unlocks when you plug this unit in. So just be aware of that. But that's like the keyboard mode in Rekordbox. So you've got that. Now the second one is save loops. It'll just let you trigger any save loops. The third one is loop roll, which is the classic that loop roll effect. So the parameter buttons will decide what section of possible loop rolls your buttons are controlling. These are controlling beat jump. I've got beat jump turned on in Serato. If I was to turn beat jump off, I'd have 8 loop roll options there. Press loop roll again and you just get normal looping, which is similar to the normal loop controls here, on, off, half and double. You do get manual looping here as well, but this is just auto looping in here. Sampler will let you trigger your samples. You press sampler again though, and you go down to scratch bank mode. And scratch bank mode is nice because this lets you quickly load a track that you've got in one of the scratch pad positions, and you can use the parameter to move around. So you've got quite a lot of these that you can load up. So you load whole tracks, for instance, onto slots in the sampler here, or in the scratch bank as it's called, with a cue point on them. And so you can have a cue point at a particular scratch sound you like. So for instance, in this second slot here, I've got the It's Joey Agos track, and there's a cue point. You can see a little orange cue point on there. If I press the button here, it will immediately load that track onto the deck at that cue point. And the idea is I can quickly scratch. That's one of my scratch sounds. And when I'm finished, I can hold down shift and press any of those buttons and it'll go back to the track that was on that deck before. It's a nice way if you're using 2 decks to DJ with and you've already got another track lined up here, but you just want to do a bit of scratching to access a scratch sentence or a scratch sound, quickly load it to the deck, do your thing, and then by pressing shift in any of those pads, you're back with the track that you had on there before. This is new to this controller. It's not new. It first came out on the Pioneer DJM S11, but it's now being rolled out across lots of other Serato gear as well. So that's on there. So as I say, a fully fledged implementation of the pads there. You're certainly not going to miss anything. The next thing I wanted to talk to you about was public performance, because this is designed for pros. It's designed to play out and about. So it's got lots of things that you would expect. So to start with, we've already touched on it. 2 decks in the back. You can plug in 2 extra things, which you then select by putting the selectors at the top to line. There's also an auxiliary input. The auxiliary input shares one of the two mic inputs. So there's two microphones around the back, and around here we've got controls, level controls, and 2-band EQ for the mics. And one of those, mic number 2, there's a little switch to turn it on so that you're controlling the auxiliary input instead there. So lots of extra inputs for you. There's also a split Q. So your headphones has got a little split Q switch, which some mixers I think should know better haven't got on. And that's really good if you're DJing and there's no monitor speaker near you, or the monitor speaker blows up or is bad or whatever, because you can then monitor in one earphone and have your pre-fade listen or your cues in the other earphone, and you can learn to DJ without any speakers at all. So that's there as well. Again, it's a bit of a pro feature. Good to see it on a controller. Not many controllers have that. And also it's got balanced main and booth outputs. Of course it's got a main and booth, but there's a balanced option for both there, balanced XLRs. And finally it's got 2 USB sockets, so you can plug in 2 DJs, have one DJ USB-B, one DJ on USB-A on each of these channels. Good for playing back to back and good for switching between DJs. So all features that you would expect on a Pro controller. One or two other things I wanted to point out. The library functions are here. They've gone for the one per deck. So each deck has got a scroll. You use this to scroll. You push down to load the track. You use this little button here to go back to the file tree or back to the particular playlist you're in now. And tap it twice for instant doubles across the decks. Just nicely implemented like that. So let's talk about what else is like this out there. The first controller that springs to mind for me is the Traktor Kontrol S4. This is also motorized, but it's a little bit different. It's like a normal jog wheel that goes around. It doesn't have the slip mat and the kind of scratch feel that you get on this unit here. But that is one of the very few motorized controllers you'll find out there. Of course, Newmark with its NS7 series, but they're a lot bigger and heavier than this. I'm not even sure if they still make them, but the NS7 III is the latest model of that. But really, this size is kind of on its own out there. Now, if you don't want scratch features, if scratch features aren't massively important to you, while you might have fallen in love with this, it's probably not the right device for you. I think if you don't want scratch features, for a couple of hundred less, you can have the Pioneer DDJ 1000 SRT, and the SRT has got 4 channels. It's got lots of hardware effects on it. Probably a better choice, but for a scratch DJ who's used to vinyl, you know, this blows the Pioneer DDJ 1000 out of the water. Of course, the Rane 12s and the 70 or 72 mixer is the ultimate scratch Serato setup, and it's going to cost you multiples of what this unit will cost you, and of course, very unportable as well. So, you know, it really stands on its own out there. Now, final thoughts on this. Well, this isn't a new idea. This was done, as I say, on many, many years ago on the Newmark stuff. But it's definitely new for Rane, and it's brilliantly, brilliantly done here. This is Rane DNA all the way through. The quality is impeccable. It's brilliant to play on. We can find nothing worth mentioning that we don't like about this unit. And it's actually quite good value. You know, it's not an impulse buy at $1,500, but for what you get here, 2 fully motorized platters, Rane audio quality, full Serato implementation, it's pretty good value. I guess at the very beginning of this review, your heart said, I want that. And that's why you're still watching at the end of this review. If your heart wants this, just go and buy it. Your head will thank you when it's sunk in what this can do. I don't think you'd be making a mistake. So next steps, watch the scratch demo that we've made. So you can see some of these features I've talked about really being put through their paces by Scratch DJ. Our Scratching for Controller DJ's tutor Steve has made that, and there's a link underneath for it. I've also linked underneath to our full written review. It's the best written review you'll find about this anywhere on the internet. So do go and look at that. I go into a lot more detail about some of these things over there. And finally, as always, and as I said at the beginning, if you have found this useful, please do like, follow, share, and subscribe to help us out and to help you out, because it'll let us tell you when we make more stuff just like this. Now, get good, get out there, make the moments, and I'll see you in another review very soon.